become all that we can be. So Joe and his wife Carol, originally from Buffalo, New York, they moved to Roanoke in 1973 when Joe started the program of audiology and speech pathology service at the Veterans Administration Hospital in Salem. He served there as service chief. And notably, he established some clinical ties or clinical teaching affiliations with the University of Virginia, with JMU, and with Radford University during his tenure at the VA. He took early retirement from the government in 2002. He calls it retirement, but very honestly, he continued to perform as needed clinical speech language services for several staffing and home health agencies throughout the New River Valley. He fully retired in 2015. And he and Carol moved to Brandon Oaks in November of 2019. And you will probably recognize Joseph and Carol as one of the more wellness active couples in residence here at Brandon Oaks. One thing of note is that Joseph has volunteered for the Residence Council representative for the NRC for this coming year. And Joe, thank you for being that representative in this community. Now, I'm anxious to see how to answer his question, what came I here to do, and to see how to become all that I can be. So now it's up to you, Dr. Joseph Masters. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Vice for that wonderful introduction. And thank all of you that are present for being a part of our Brandon Oaks family. Your presence matters. Audience presence is already audience participation. I invite you to pause and reflect on what brings you here and what you contribute to this occasion. My father had a stroke at age 58. He recovered, enjoyed life with family, traveled, things he had postponed along those 58 years until he could retire. He experienced 5 or 6 additional stroke recurrences over the next 27 years. He recovered from most of the disabilities encountered, enjoying most of what he had hoped to accomplish. While visiting outdoors with him one day, he began a most serious conversation with me. I saw St. Peter. Surprised, I responded, "You did? What did he say?" Dad replied, "He told me I could not stay there. I have to go back." After a few minutes, I asked, "Did he say why?" "There is something else I need to do." I thought for a moment. Did St. Peter say what that is? "No," was his answer. After another moment, I said, "You must figure that out. You won't get another chance." This conversation ended. We went indoors. We never discussed it again. I don't know if he figured it out or if he accomplished it. He passed away 2 years later of a rare form of cancer. My faith teaches us we are placed here for a purpose. An audiologist I hired was unpacking items in her office when I stopped by, noticing a plaque. "Grow where you are planted." Where did that come from? It was a gift from her father. I was born breech, 10 pounds, 11 ounces, after a long, difficult pregnancy to a mother who was the eldest of 7 children, born to immigrant parents. 4 of her 5 younger brothers were called into World War II within days of my birth. My father was spared from the draft because he was a defense plant steel worker. His best friend was one of those four brothers who left home for 2 years to face enemy gunfire, while remaining family were left to contend with my tenuous life. Each returned home unharmed when the war ended. One passed away last year at age 102 and a half. Only one remains, age 98. When I was 4, my parents moved from my grandparents' house in Lackawanna to Buffalo, New York, opening a floral shop and dance hall, hoping one day my dad would raise his family free of employment in the Lackawanna steel mill. It never happened. They closed the shop in the summer of 1966, 2 months after completing their last wedding order for Carol and me. They lost their delivery boy and janitor. Dad continued to work in the steel mill until his first stroke in 1976, 2 weeks before my brother's wedding, which my parents both missed because Dad was bedridden. Speaking of my brother, after causing all that pain and discomfort of my birth for my mother and worry for my survival for my grandparents, aunt, and uncle who remained in the household, while 4 sons and siblings dodged bullets and bombs, I had the nerve to bug the hell out of my parents for a baby brother after Mom was told she could never have another child. Instead, they were presented with a 2-year-old malnourished girl whose mother stopped in at the flower shop one day when I was 7, leaving Judy sitting in a stroller outside on the sidewalk. As my father walked in the door from the day shift at the steel mill, he complimented the woman for having a beautiful daughter. The woman acknowledged by asking, "Do you want her?" They adopted her. Disappointed with a sister, I continued to prod them for a baby brother until he was born 4 years later when I was 11. My adopted sister was treated like a natural-born child, not being told she was adopted until much later in life. Mom and Dad sacrificed day and night. He worked 3 shifts in the steel mill, coming home to help my mother with the operation of the flower shop and dance hall. They were determined their 3 children would have an opportunity they didn't, a college education. I didn't have a clue why I would need a college education. Dad thought it would be a good idea if I pursued medicine or law at the then private University of Buffalo. He had attended Canisius College for a year, studying chemistry, until dropping out to help his mother and disabled father with household expenses. After my senior year in high school, I decided to get a real paying job. I got one at a drugstore near the flower shop and dance hall where we lived. I entered the university and took chemistry, physics, and biology required for medicine and pharmacy school. In addition, I took public speaking required for the pharmacy school. I was on the debate team in high school, but never took a formal public speaking course. I received grades of F in chemistry, D in physics and biology, and an A in public speaking. I went to the professor and said, "I want to major in the drama and speech department." She asked, "What do you want to do with it?" I said, "Graduate." She signed me up for Introduction to the Theater, requiring participation in 2 theater productions, Phonetics and Introductions to Speech Pathology and Audiology. I had a non-speaking stage appearing part in a Shakespearean play. I don't remember which one. I worked the lighting crew for Guys and Dolls. I earned grades of B in theater and phonetics and an A in audiology and speech pathology. Though never hearing of audiology or speech pathology previously, I chose them as a major. By the time I received the bachelor's degree, a master's degree was required for national certification and state licensure. The University of Buffalo had become the State University of New York at Buffalo and began a graduate program in speech pathology and audiology. I entered hoping to get a tuition-free assistantship and $3,000. Instead, the speech clinic director gave me an application for a state-sponsored stipend worth $2,000, no tuition waiver, requiring I take courses for public school certification in speech pathology. There were only 2 available statewide. I didn't want to work in the public schools. However, I decided to toss the completed application into a mailbox instead of a trash can. 1 month later, I was awarded one of the 2 stipends. Upon completing the undergraduate degree, I worked as a summer research assistant at Roswell Park Memorial Cancer Research Institute under the tutelage of its speech language pathologist. One day, I went to the cafeteria for lunch much later than normal when hardly anyone was there. As I sat minding my own business, a group of ladies approached. The eldest asked if they could join me. I agreed. Carol, being the youngest, sat next to me. We began dating. She was a medical secretary. She began to help with my graduate research projects, especially those involved with typing. I had asked my father in high school whether to take a typing or creative writing course my senior year. He said, "Take creative writing. You can always get a secretary to type whatever you write." Later, I told him that was the worst piece of advice he had ever given me. I still can't type. We were married June 4th, 1966. Carol continued working as a medical secretary while I continued to complete my thesis. For 2 summers, I was offered an opportunity to establish a speech pathology program for a school system where my cousin worked. I recruited a classmate to fill a created position after the 2nd summer. By the time I received my master's degree in 1967, I wanted to teach in a university or be the administrator of a speech clinic. The university had begun a doctoral program offering me that elusive tuition-free assistantship. I completed the doctoral program in 1970. Carol typed my dissertation. I became the clinical coordinator at Bowling Green State University in Ohio. A year later, I joined the Veterans Affairs Medical Center at East Orange, New Jersey, as a staff speech language pathologist. 2 years later, I accepted a position of Chief Audiology and Speech Pathology Services at Salem, Virginia. It was transitioning from an all-psychiatric to a medical surgical psychiatric facility. I established the service beginning with a phone, desk, and a chair in a windowless room. I designed, equipped, staffed, and supervised the speech and hearing clinic from January 1973 until taking an early retirement in 2002. During those years, I established clinical training affiliations with UVA, James Madison, and Radford Universities. I supervised the students, the secretaries, and the audiologists I hired. I remained the sole speech language pathologist, treating all of the patients referred to the clinic, always bringing the need for one more speech language pathologist to the attention of the administration. They staffed the clinic with 3 after my retirement. I advised my daughters, don't quit a job before finding one. While contemplating leaving the VA, one of my daughters saw an ad for tax preparers and encouraged me to apply. You always do your own tax returns and taught each of us to complete ours. I took the required tax preparation course. The franchise owner learned of my background and asked me to supervise one of his tax offices for the tax season. After the second tax season, I filled a temporary speech pathology position at a nursing home in Bluefield, Virginia, while the speech language pathologist was on maternity leave. Afterwards, I began working for a series of staffing companies that sought hospital and nursing home positions locally. I answered a newspaper ad and began doing as-needed work for several home health agencies with offices in Roanoke, Clifton Forge, and Christiansburg, taking me to homes in Whiteville, Martinsville, Glen Lynn, Smith Mountain Lake, Bedford, Covington, and Hot Springs. We began receiving marketing invitations to Brandon Oaks Luncheons. The guest speaker for one of them was a former colleague at the VA, Dr. Gary Oberlander, Betty Oberlander's son. His topic, when is the right time to consider a place like Brandon Oaks? His advice was to choose it while both of us are healthy, can select it together, and enjoy its amenities. When medical care is needed, it's in place. He joined us for lunch and asked, Joe, are you considering a move to Brandon Oaks? I replied, when the time is right. We joined the Boaks Club and began frequenting the luncheons and programs considering living spaces. Carol required total hip replacement surgery 4 years ago. She utilized the outstanding inpatient and outpatient physical and occupational treatment services across the street. We still didn't think it was the right time to move here. 2 years ago, Carol experienced a medical emergency requiring additional physical and speech therapies, which she again received as an outpatient at Fishwick. Her physician advised we consider moving to a 1-floor living space where she could receive continued medical services if needed. We revisited Brandon Oaks, selected a 1-bedroom apartment, and moved here. Like the telephone commercial, reach out and touch someone, we can now reach out and touch everything and everyone in our cozy abode. We were trying to learn everyone's name when the virus entered everyone's life. And here we all are, trying to adapt to a new normal way of life. What do speech language pathologists do? Mama was our first speech therapist. Though she didn't have formal training, she taught all of us to talk. How did she do that? She sat us in her lap, at a table or on the floor. She got us interested in something around us and encouraged us to become involved with it, building pathways throughout the brain, helping us to learn through listening, understanding, vocalizing, and formulating words which transmit ideas we store in our brains. She planted the seeds which allow us to grow, to become all we are capable of being. As the effects of aging, disease, or trauma diminish the skills she taught, we need to return to the techniques Mama used. As a speech language pathologist, I try to assess the extent to which each skill diminishes, then encourage someone to become involved in an area of interest, engaging them in a conversation about it, building new pathways throughout the brain to circumvent and replace those affected, to once again grow where one is planted and become all one is capable of being. Excuse me. With Mama, it took us about 16 to 18 months to say the first meaningful words for our audience to understand. Mama was adept at understanding. She was able to tune into our body and nonverbal communication skills long before anyone else. The process of developing communication extends far beyond these formative experiences with Mama, even beyond our school years, well into adulthood. The process of communication development is more complex than any other human function, beginning with the infant's first cry, progressing to babble and echolalia, attaching sound and words to surrounding objects and people, stringing sounds into words, phrases, and sentences, recognizing written symbols that have meaning, producing graphic symbols which convey meaning, takes place over many years. Compare this with physical development, whereby a child begins to crawl, walk, climb at 9 to 10 months, long before the first meaningful words are recognized and understood by others besides Mama. When communication is delayed, interrupted, or damaged by other developmental factors like hearing loss, learning disability, or the onset of disease, trauma, stroke, heart disorder, cancer, brain trauma, etc., the ability to communicate is less than ideal. The process of improvement and recovery is significantly slower due to the complexity of the task and the process. Additional skills are diminished when disease and trauma interrupt our ability to communicate. For instance, strokes, neurological disease, and traumatic events cause brain damage involving physical and cognitive impairment. It's not unusual to experience slower and less than total recovery of communication skills. The ultimate goal of communication treatment is to help someone grow where planted, to become all each is capable of being. None of my patients chose to be in the circumstances they found themselves. They all wanted to be somewhere else, doing things they enjoy with family and friends, rather than attending doctor appointments and therapy sessions. Now, allow me to ask the question, where came you here to do? We each traveled different paths, finding our way to Brandon Oaks Retirement Community. For the most part, everyone chooses to be here for varied reasons. I'm reminded of the song Summertime and the living is easy. Brandon Oaks is ideal for easy living any time of the year. We came here for a purpose. No matter how delightful, none of us can stay here the way we were, the way we are. In the words of St. Peter to my dad, there is something else we need to do. Brandon Oaks is not your grandmother's old folks home. Neither is it simply a retirement community. Rather, it's a premier healthcare community dedicated to everyone's physical, emotional, and spiritual health, where dedicated staff are like Mama, welcoming us home, offering a variety of interesting, fun activities with new learning opportunities and a household of new friends to share in them. Never is this more true than now during the coronavirus crisis. Just like a loving mother and father, searching desperately to shield one another from the unknown, gathering wisdom from every known expert provided by the Almighty Being, protecting us from harm, even death, until death do us part. Yes, we are home again, not alone, but as family. Don't dwell on the do-nots. Find new interests. Focus on the can-do opportunities of today. Get involved. Share with those around us. Live life with purpose. Become all you can be. The opportunity is now. Brandon Oaks is planting more seed. Edible books to grow seed has been distributed to you as a token reminder. Caring staff is dedicated to nurturing us beyond Mama's footsteps on fertile ground to become all you are capable of being. I am so honored that you came to listen today. Before I turn this over to Buster, I would like to recognize several people responsible for the success of this presentation. First, Rindy Lionberger, who chaired Professionally Speaking last year, inspiring me to be a part of this activity. It was originally planned for last May, but postponed due to the pandemic restrictions implemented to keep the virus at bay. Second, Buster Jones, who chairs the committee this year. He has great plans to enhance its purpose. Third, Teresa Walco, the technician behind the screen you are watching, without whom none of this would take place right now. She was invaluable with advertising, scheduling, and training the speaker. Fourth, Toby Bowe and several of his crew, Brandon, Caleb, Corey, Frank, and Warren, all involved with obtaining the handout supplies and setting me up with them. Fifth, the delivery crew, beginning with Jessica White, who told me where everyone lives so that Bob Miller and Al Robers could deliver to main building, first floor. Nancy Barber on the second floor. Joyce Murray on the third floor. Margot Realmuto found you in Dogwood. Fred Duran dropped by at the Pines and Cottages, while Paul White roamed the village homes. The inspiration for the handout came from my three daughters, Janet Broadway, Ellen Postel, and Deborah Abramowitz, who insisted, "Dad, you need props, handouts, something to eat." Ellen is the graphic artist who designed and produced the bag labels. And last but not least, birthday girl Carol, who listened to this presentation more than anyone could tolerate and still helped me assemble and prepare the seed bags for distribution. Happy birthday, I love you. Buster, who has a question? Let's see what they have to say and we'll try to answer it.
Joe, thank you so much. What a great opening presentation for our series of 2021. We appreciate it. It's interesting to see your background and to learn a little bit about the profession and where you've helped so many people for so many years. One item you mentioned that particularly I think is interesting to me is that when you were at VA and you were serving as the sole clinician, and when you left, they had to hire 3 people to fill your position. That's a testament to to the work you were doing. So thanks again for your presentation. I would ask that any of the audience that might have a question for Joe, raise your hand, unmute, and we'll patch you in. And if you have a question and you're just watching on the closed circuit 1961, just call extension 2229 and I'll pass the question on to Joe. We'll give you a few seconds to do that. I see our friend Bob Miller. Bob, unmute yourself. Come on.
Done that. Ready? Joe, as an audiologist, did you get into the causes of hearing losses and causes of abilities not to speak, or was what you did mostly therapeutic?
Well, I've been doing this long enough that it goes back to originally the field was all one, and somewhere along the way, I think it was in my sophomore year of college, the American Speech and Hearing Association came up with a split certification for audiology and speech pathology. And so my initial background was in audiology as well as speech pathology. And then when the certification and the licensure was directed to one or the other, I decided to pursue the speech pathology route, mainly because at the time the faculty at the university were mostly speech pathologists. There was only one audiologist. But then when I became the chief of the audiology and speech pathology program, I was responsible for both areas and had to supervise them. And it was that background, that early background, and I kept up with it through continuing education that allowed me to supervise and oversee the audiology portion of it.
Thank you.
All right. Got an incoming call here. Go ahead. This is Buster.
Hey, Buster, it's Sharon Baga.
Hi, Sharon.
I'm just wondering if Joe can tell us about the seeds. Are they all edible, and what are they?
Okay, I'll ask. Hey, Joe, the question is, explain the seeds a little bit more. Are they edible? Should they be planted? A little something to do with that clever packet of seeds.
Well, I can tell everybody's all excited for those horticulture beds to get going, and they want to run out there and plant something, but they are all edible. Let me see if I can remember what they include. Flaxseed, kai seed, several different varieties of pumpkin seed, and sunflower seed. And flax. Yeah, and flax. And so they're all edible. Now, if you choose to plant them, be careful where you plant them, because you might get a pumpkin growing out of your coffee table or a sunflower. But they were meant to be. Toby Bowe helped me with that selection and actually provided them, and with the supplies, and Carol and I assembled the bags and put the labels on them.
Okay, thanks, Joe. And I see Nancy Barber's watching and on Zoom, and knowing Nancy, she'll figure a way to bake them into a cake. Any other questions or phone calls?
They were the whole intent of the presentation was to encourage everybody to grow from where they are now, using the abilities and the opportunities that we have before us right now. And that was the idea of, planting a seed and growing. You're supposed to eat the seed and find a way to grow yourself.
I saw a hand flash, Janet Broadway from Richmond. Janet, did you have a question?
I didn't have a question. I was just clapping because I liked his comments and his presentation.
Oh, that was clapping. Okay, I agree. Let's all thank Joe. Excellent, excellent, excellent.
I see a number 2 daughter of the 3, Ellen Postel, the person who's responsible for the labels is online too. I don't know if she's listening here and wants to say something, but how are you doing?
I'm here, and that was very nicely done. I hope you all enjoy those seeds and grow where you're planted. Nicely done, Pops.
Ellen is in Bon Air, Georgia, and the 3rd daughter, Deborah, is in Denver with 2 of our grandchildren, Cosette, who has just turned 7 about a month ago, and Sawyer, who is lining up here to have a birthday in a couple days. I think it's the 17th. He's going to be 5.
Oh, great. Okay, folks, I think that's it. I would thank everybody for participating today. And Joe, particularly, thank you for your presentation. I look forward to the rest of the series this coming year.